Hi, this is Debra Carmona with a practical video. Today I'm going to share some practical tips in getting started with card making, how to get yourself motivated, and ways to start the creative juices, and some practical tips in managing your supplies, especially the scraps that tend to pile up. There may be times you want to create or just play with paper, but you have no specific idea and you don't know where to start. How do you begin? These tips will get you started. Begin by tidying things up, putting things in their rightful places, because everything should have a place. You can start by picking up the small bits of trash or the extra stuff that got dropped on your desk that you know you'll likely use in the future project. There's likely some leftover bits from your last project, like these die cutouts that I used to make Christmas cards. I like to save small scraps, but I like to square them up before putting them away because I don't like to waste paper supplies. These little pieces can be used when I put sentiments on the front of my cards. After I've cut out the useful parts, I then can throw away the remaining scraps. I have a system for managing my scraps, which is mainly what this video is all about, and I like to keep my scraps at a very minimum. I sort the strips by size. The narrow ones go into my narrow strip bin. The wider go into my box for the larger bits, to be used for bigger sentiments. These two places are the very first place I go when I want to place a sentiment on the front of my card. Perhaps like me, you left a pile of papers that were used on one of your last projects. You had intended to go back to that and make some more cards using those same supplies because you really liked them. But life happens. And I do need to make more of those because I liked them a lot. And I've given all those cards away, so they were very useful. But I don't want to make them right now. I don't feel like it. The papers were already selected and they're color coordinated, so we'll just slip the entire collection into a large gallon-sized bag to put aside for another day. I keep a basket of such projects to do later when I find the time, or if I just feel like playing with paper and don't know what to do. You can see some of my Christmas card experiments that I played with, which I will revisit later in the year. I also had a pile of papers sitting off to one side of my workspace for either ongoing projects or potential future projects. You probably have such a pile too. I often will recycle my video scripts from my voiceovers. They get dropped here after I've recorded the script. I hate to waste paper, so I often use those pages as a base to do my strip work, which I have done 3 or 4 videos on. I will revisit that also in this video because I invented a new twist to it. In this pile, I also had some small prints of some of my own artworks that I sized down because I thought the images would make good images for a card. Rather than have them pile up, I will just quickly separate them so that I can store them with my other small images and ephemera. I keep a box on my desk for such things. I will trim them a little closer to what I want them later, when I actually get around to using them. Dealing with the pile of papers has revealed a small pile of scraps. I pick out the larger pieces, which might be usable, but the rest is swept into the garbage. Now that I have cleared the area, I can see the dust that has accumulated, so I bring out my small broom and dustpan to clear the space. Dust and tiny paper scraps do have a way of accumulating, and we do need to clean our workspace periodically. I often keep scraps on my desktop to write a note or to test an ink color. Sometimes it's just a good idea to discard that top sheet because it just feels cleaner than to look at the dirtied piece of paper. When you start cleaning, you realize there are more areas that probably need cleaning too. Cleaning is therapeutic. Having a clean working space is good for the mind too. Uncluttering the desk helps to unclutter the mind, to make room for more creative things to take place. I usually, even in my art space, that's what I do. First thing I do is I tidy things up, I clean things up, and then before I get ready to create. So I decided to take the next step, to remove everything at the back of my table because I just know there are dust and tiny bits of paper, plus some cat hairs, lurking back there. In the process of moving everything out of the way, I realized how having to move so many items was slightly annoying. I much prefer to move a basket or a box of things than several different items, which is kind of tedious. I want all these glues at my fingertips, but I don't really like how they look sitting there. A thought is developing. These are the tools that I reach for most often, which is why I want them on my desktop. But I'm not sure I like the look of this stuff. It is organized clutter. I'll get back to this. As I continue to declutter my desk, I come across a stack of cards and notes, mostly thank you notes. I always keep every card or note given to me. Perhaps one day I will make a scrapbook to remind me of how I have been a blessing to others and how they were thankful to me. It might be a great encouragement to lift me whenever I do get down. But for now, I have a file folder where I toss them for safekeeping. I know where they are whenever I find time to make that book. I keep 2 floor tiles on my desk to work on because they can easily be washed if I get ink or glues on them. I realized there's probably dust and bits of paper under them, so I might as well remove them and sweep the dust away. Then I gave the tiles a wash. My desk is now clean, but there's room for improvement. I go around the house and I found this basket that was not currently being used for anything important. So I decided to place all of my glues, adhesive sprays, glue sticks, and also my tub of colored pencils, the tiny scrap jar, and my watercolored pencils into the basket. The taller basket will hide some of the clutter, yet it will keep my supplies handy, and then moving these things will take a lot less time, less tedious. After doing this, I realized I needed to rearrange some of the stuff on my desk. I have to keep the shorter items that fit under the windowsill. I keep the windowsill clean for the cats to lay, and also because I close the shutters at night, so I don't want anything tall enough that would be in the way of the shutters to pass over. I like this better. My scissors are right handy to me, on my right hand. My glues are within reach. I can see my grandkids on the caddy of tools. My craft knife is there. The strip bin. My drop basket for starter cards, that's cards that are partially done, boxes of ephemera, and my small scrap bin. I much prefer it right in front of me. It makes it easier to sift through when I need just a little bit of color to back a sentiment or to cut out a small die. And my 6x6 papers. Just one last thing that needs to be put away, a lonely stencil. I decided to place it with all of my other stencils since I don't really have very many stencils at present, but I'd like to collect more of them. Finally, my workspace is clean, uncluttered, and I feel good. I am ready to begin. Then I realized I have company. All 4 of my indoor cats are in the room with me. Most of them are napping. They're all cozy, and I'm ready to start crafting. I have cleared my space so I can start making another mess. That's what we do as crafters. I know, isn't it funny? We clean up the mess so we can make another mess. The first thing I did to get me started was I pulled out a group of papers that I had paper clipped together from my printed scrap bin. These are leftover papers that have been used in a previous project. My goal is to use up what I have before I cut up any new papers. I got control of my scraps last year, and I am endeavoring to remain in control. I do not want to add more scraps to my scrap bins, and I do not want to have to devote a large area in my craft space just to keep and store all the scraps. So I am always looking for ways to use up those scraps first. I'm not going to invest in an entire system just to keep saving scraps. The goal is to use up the papers. We buy papers to make something out of them, so I need to work on using them up rather than just to be a collector of papers. I have been watching tours of craft rooms lately, and I am amazed at how much stuff people collect. I thought I was bad and that I had a lot of stuff because I do so many different types of crafts, and I have supplies for each different craft. With card making, I have decided to streamline my crafting. I have limited myself to only making birthday cards, anniversary cards, and a few sympathy cards, which I have had to use a lot more lately. I do Christmas cards, but no other holidays. I also keep a small supply of thank you cards. I do have a few cards set aside that could be for special things such as weddings, new baby, or when I feel impressed to just send someone a note. The cards are pretty much done, but without a sentiment, until I need it. That way, I can make it more personal and applicable to the situation. So in looking at the few scraps that I pulled, I began looking for other papers that might coordinate with those colors or prints. I looked through my 12 by 12 print paper. After pulling out a handful, I cut them in half, so now they're 6 by 12. I put the half sheets back in with the print papers. Then I began to cut 1-inch wide strips. I opted to only cut 2 of each paper, leaving a 4 by 12 paper so that they could still be used as a backdrop for other cards in the future. That decision was wise because all I needed was just a few strips to work with the scraps that I had planned on using up. It worked out perfectly. You know, cutting up paper is also a great way to get you started. The blue and green print that looks like painting or brush strokes was the paper that I decided to finish up to use up. Some papers had different prints on the back, giving me more options. After choosing the sides I preferred to work with, I began playing with my strips. We play. That is what we do. Playing gets the creative juices flowing. This design has become my go-to design when I don't really have a plan. I used it for my Christmas cards this past Christmas. I used it for my black and white papers to make masculine and sympathy cards. I find it's a great way to use up the scrap papers, and it is a fun way to do it. I'm doing things a little bit different with these papers. Since my base paper has typing on both sides, I cannot leave a small white gap between the papers. So I have to put the papers up close to each other. So I do consider contrast when choosing my layout. I cut off the ends because I might need to use them in this card. It's always a good idea to repeat the use of the same print, or at least 2 or 3 times. This helps to pull the card together as a whole. I find using a glue stick to make the process faster. I do try to balance out the papers, not having too much of one color and too little of another. Before you know it, you have made several cards. They're not finished because they still need a sentiment, but just having a generic collection gives you options when you need to whip up a birthday card or an anniversary that is coming up. I continued to play with the papers with the goal of using up the original paper scraps I had pulled. I did flip a few of the strips over to use the print on the other side, and when I needed a bit more color, I went to my 12-inch box that keeps my long strips and pulled out a few more colors that might work. When making cards, we always end up with buku amounts of leftover white strips. I had some cut into a 1/4-inch strips, so I started using them between each colored paper. That is a good use for using up those white strips. In selecting colors, I tried to pull out the colors of the main print. I see pink flowers, so pink strips will be used. The rules for this design are simple. When you place the first strip, do not cut the card in half with 2 equal sides. That's a bad composition. If the strip starts on one corner, make sure that it comes off one of the sides, but not the opposite corner. You can place 2 long strips next to each other, but the next strip you put on must be perpendicular. It's all about grain composition, and diagonals they just work. Even in art, diagonals are just an awesome directional line. They just look better than horizontal lines or vertical lines. Diagonals work. You can limit the colors to 3, but you can have more the 3 colors to your overall card. This quarter sheet is a little larger by 5¼ inches long, so that it will fit a card base 4½ by 5½. I have met my goals of using up the pattern papers, so now I can sift out the papers I will no longer need to toss into the trash. I still have a few leftover pieces of some of the prints from the new papers, so my aim is to use those up for this session. So bye-bye, blues and purples. I put away the bold colored strips that I will no longer be using into my 12-inch long strip bin. That's where all my long strips go. Assessing what I have left to work with, I found a few strips in my strip bin that I could use with these colors on my desk, and so I continued. My colors are peach and green. This time I used green 1/4 inch strips for added contrast between the wider strips. I used white 1/4 inch strips because I didn't want too much green. White is much softer. Adding white to any pattern always softens the colors. As an afterthought, I told myself, oh, I should have put a white narrow strip spacer there. That's okay. I can just add it to the top. I still have paper, so let's make another card. I must keep going until I have used up all of the main printed scraps. When I sit down to do some card making or playing with paper, I usually start with my scraps because my aim is to use the paper and not adding to the scrap stash. I don't want a large collection of scraps. Managing the scraps must be a big part of the process. Plus, it saves money and supplies. I see people having huge, large areas in the craft space devoted to just keeping scraps, while at the same time trying to maximize the limited space that they have. Why store so many scraps? Use them up. Let the scrap pile be the first place you go to find something to make with them. Keep a list of birthdays, anniversaries, and any other holidays that you make cards for. This can also be your gift-giving list. Keep that list posted somewhere handy so that you can have those items on your mind so that you can look and know what's coming next. When I sit down to make cards, I usually check my list to see who's next so I can work towards making their card. And then I can plan for that person. Sometimes I like to coordinate the card with the gift I'm going to make, if I'm making a gift. This helps me keep up with my gift and card giving program and to hopefully stay ahead of the game. I make approximately 12 anniversary cards each year and 35 birthday cards, and anywhere between 30 to 100 Christmas cards every year. There may be a few more special occasions or sympathy cards that you don't plan for, but just under 200 cards a year, and that's enough. I don't want to do more than that. Keeping up with that is quite enough. Well, looks like I've exhausted the scraps. Goal achieved. The few remaining solid colored strips go back into the strip bin. Once again, no new papers added to my scraps today. Instead, we have eliminated some, and in the process, I have made over a dozen cards. They still need sentiments, but that can be done another day. This method can use up old papers, giving them a fresh new look. Plus, you can have fun playing with paper. Now, let me show you some of the cards that I created. Take a look at this card. Here I used quilling strips. I put a white quilling strip here to just break up this wide 1-inch green, just because. I'd used green quilling strips on either side to create contrast, because this is not a very dark color, nor are these. It's kind of light, light, light. So I felt like the contrast was needed using a quilling strip. And then I decided, oh, I like that. And I had a little tiny strip of this, actually that same paper. I decided to put it here. And that just added just, I don't know, a little extra dimension. And then this is a quilling strip, white quilling strips. So you can combine quilling strips with this particular design, and that just gives just one other dimension to your strip card making designs. Here's another idea. I used this edge. I had to cut off about that much of the die cut. Here's a quilling strip, and I use this on the dark wide 1-inch strip, and that just kind of softens the green, and I just like that pattern, and it's about the right length. I just had to trim it on both sides. That was actually an afterthought. And you can also use embossed papers, because I was in this card I only had pink and green and very little white. Oh, but I didn't want to pull in any new papers, and I was trying to stick with what I had. So I had some scraps of these. So I said, well, I'll just use that. It's just a little bit of white. And then by putting this in there, that just helped to balance the card out. So I just want to show you those two interesting designs, and just sort of a new twist to strip making for card bases. And this is the design that I'm going to use for my anniversary cards. I will make all my anniversary cards, and they will all have this design, and the message will be the same. This way I can be assured that I'm not repeating the message every year. So I do all my anniversary cards the same for everybody. The colors may vary, like these are mostly peach and green. That one is pink and green. Now this one is slightly different, because I decided that it didn't need to have the white cut out. I felt like that looked just fine, just like that. So, but I still need to make some more. So I have other papers that I'll be playing with, doing the same kind of thing, but the message for my anniversary cards will all be the same. This is only here to keep them from opening up, just so you can see it better. Okay, these are the main papers that I had selected that I was trying to get rid of. It's these paint papers, paintings, and brush strokes, and this is a pink that looks like canvas paper, textured paint strokes. So these are the papers that I initially was trying to get rid of. I pulled in some bright colors from my 12-inch strips that came from the strip bin, and then I worked with the colors that were, these are the main papers. And so I made 5 of those kind of cards. So that paper is now exhausted, and I don't have any more of it. And then I combined that green paint brush strokes with the peach and the orange, because I had pulled out peaches and orange, mainly because the peaches and the orange, they looked really good with that. Looks like canvas textured green. So I was able to make all these cards. Now these don't have messages on them right now because I haven't got to that part. But today, well, actually it was yesterday, I was able to make all of these cards. Ta-da! Just because I wanted to use up scraps. I hope you found today's video useful and practical, and that it will get you going in your crafting or card making endeavor. I hope you have a great time crafting. And as always, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and do subscribe and check out my playlist, card making, for more practical tips. Thanks for watching. This is my crafting cat. She always likes to get into my videos one way or another. Look, she has her place in the corner of the desk. She's actually showcasing the cards that we are going to make today. Well, okay, so she's not showcasing them. She's showcasing herself. Okay, cut. Hi, this is Debra Carmona today. I'm Debra Carmona every day.